Hello, it's Jade Edwards, Clovis Unified PBIS Coordinator. Hi, it's Carrie Machado, District School Psychologist and PBIS District Coach. And we are here to talk to you today about correcting inappropriate behavior. So what do we do with those behaviors that we don't like so much? Let's begin. The first thing you want to remember when you're correcting inappropriate behaviors is to make sure that you are setting yourself up for success. One of the ways you can do that is to be consistent. If you're not used to putting in a formal consequence system in place, then that means that your kid isn't either. And they will very likely push those limits and test you to see if what you're saying is true. And if you say something is going to happen as a consequence, we've got to follow through on that, whether it's positive or negative, so that we build that trust and we have the student's buy-in or the child's buy-in when we're engaging in that kind of a system. So one of the ways that you can do that is by implementing a home flow chart. And so at our schools, we have these, they're called disciplinary flow charts, where a teacher knows exactly what to do when an inappropriate behavior occurs. They know step 1, step 2, and step 3 to be able to correct that behavior. And then what happens as far as consequences? When do we engage consequences? So I'm suggesting that we try this at home as well. So what we know about this time right now is that tensions are high and stress is high. And when that is happening, it's a perfect storm to make an emotional reaction to a situation that maybe isn't in the best interest for ourselves or even for our children. So if we can take advantage of those times where we are calm and collected and more logical and kind of organize our thoughts at that point, it's going to serve us well, because when we get into those emotional and stressful situations with behavior with our kids, we can go back to that thought out system and refer to that to be able to help us make decisions rather than just our emotional reaction to that frustration. So one of the things we do when we're creating a flow chart is first we always want to start not just with punishment, but we want to start with giving this child an opportunity to be able to correct their behavior and learn an alternative, because it's not just about making them pay for something that we don't like that they did. It's more important that we teach what we want them to do instead, so that we can see an increase of positive behaviors, not just a decrease of the behaviors that we don't like. So the first thing I want to do, if my kid is talking back to me, I might say a reflective question. Is that the way that we talk to parents in this house? Now, I want to remind you that we need to be respectful. So what does it look like to say that respectfully to me? Right? Or what does that look like to respectfully express your feelings? Or what does responsibility look like in this situation? So making sure that you're putting it back on the student, but giving them an opportunity to correct that behavior. And then reinforce it or provide some more direction. So if they did it right, you can say, that is an example of respect. I appreciate that. Next time I expect you to do that the first time. Or if they don't quite get it right, you can model it for them. You can give a direction, like I need you to do it this way. And then again, hopefully you can reinforce that positively if they're able to meet that expectation. Now, if your guys are just having a bad day and your child does not take advantage of those learning opportunities, we want to make sure we first ask ourselves these questions. Did I remind my child what my expectations are? Or am I just assuming that they should know better? Have I given them an opportunity to practice these positive expectations? And then I want to say, did I deliver positive as well as negative consequences based on their behavior? The positive thing is important, because a lot of the time, if the kid's just doing what we want them to do, we just check out and we're on our own phones or we're doing our own stuff that we need to do, and we forget to check in and say, hey, I really appreciate the way that you're doing this thing the right way. And sometimes we only engage with our kids when we are trying to address negative things because they're bothering us. So making sure that we're still on that positive side as well. And if I've gone through that and I'm still realizing that there are challenges occurring with behavior, then I can go into establishing some consequences. And it's good to have these consequences kind of already established. What are some things that I know are effective for my student or for my child that I can actually reasonably enforce? And maybe I come up with some ones that are low level, so just for minor issues that come up here and there, like a short timeout, like losing 20 minutes of screen time, not being able to pick the preferred show, having a sibling be able to pick the show that the family watches that night, having to go to bed a little bit earlier, but then I may want to have, what are my big ticket items that I really want to have on board for when things are really not going well. So having those laid out beforehand is really helpful to keep us logical and not just reacting emotionally. And now Carrie is going to talk about what are some of the ways that we can implement those consequences.
So one of the things that are really important when we're looking at correcting inappropriate behaviors is that you are setting those limits. When working with your child, you want to make sure that you're setting both positive and those negative consequence limits. You want it to be very clear so that they have a good understanding of what your expectations are. So if you clean your room, then you get that extra game time. However, if you don't clean your room, then you're going to get whatever consequence you had already maybe predetermined in your home flow chart. So it's really crucial that we're setting those limits and making them very clear. One thing that's also very helpful is after you've set those limits, there is a parenting technique called 1, 2, 3 magic. And what this allows is for your child to have 2 warnings before a consequence is implemented. And what's really good about this is it allows your child to really, get that 1 warning from you, that's a 1. It allows them to maybe sit back, kind of self-reflect and know, oh, okay, if I get to 3, I'm going to have a consequence. And it also allows them in their own time to kind of correct that behavior and do what you're asking of them. So basically it's holding up a finger, that's a 1. You wait to see if behavior is corrected. If behavior does correct, great. Provide that positive praise for the expectation that they delivered. If it's not and behavior continues, then you give them a second warning. That's a 2. And again, if behavior stops, we provide praise, validation for what they did. If not, then unfortunately we have to move on to 3, which is going to be that consequence, whether that be a timeout, 15 minutes of no game time, etc. Again, whatever you had set up as your consequences in your family flow chart. And that is a parenting technique. It is in book form. It would be really important if you were going to want to implement something like that in the home to maybe look at the book on Amazon, purchase it, or look online just to kind of see what is behind all of that and maybe train yourself up before starting to implement something like that. The other thing that's really important when we're correcting inappropriate behaviors is we have to have meaningful consequences that are definitely enforceable. So, instead of telling your child, okay, 1 act of inappropriate behavior, you have no games for the rest of the week. Well, that isn't really, helpful in the sense too that, your child is not going to, have games. What makes them then want to behave for that week for you? So you've kind of lost them. And at the same time, is that going to be really enforceable for you too throughout the week of losing those game times? So it's really important to look at what are those consequences that I've predetermined, something that I can refer back to, something that I know that I can enforce. That's a quick enforcement, something that, 15 minutes of timeout or 10 minutes of an extra chore right now. And then we're able to move on from that and still have access throughout the day to earn different consequences or reinforcement. Also, what's important is to really consider the option of having your child earn back some of their privileges. So again, like I mentioned with the video games, if they get in trouble and you say, okay, the rest of the week you have no video games, there might not be any desire for them to want to engage in appropriate behaviors. So it's really important that we look at, okay, you may not have video games for the rest of today, but I am going to give you that option to earn back that time contingent upon, displaying appropriate behaviors. So that's really an important factor as well. Giving them that option. Yes, you've made a mistake, but I'm going to give you that option to eventually earn back some extra privileges to keep that desire going to want to continue that positive momentum with behavior.
Thank you so much for tuning in with us today. We hope that this was helpful. And our next series is going to be focusing on specific strategies to use for kids that may have ADHD or inattentive symptoms, kids that deal with anxiety or depression, oppositional behaviors. So we will be doing a week-by-week support and tip session for how do we help kids with different learning styles. Thank you so much.